We have North Carolina, 8 seed, taking on 9 seed Marquette as a 3-point favorite. What's just your initial feel for that game?
Yeah, my initial feel is these are two teams going in different directions. You look at Marquette, played above their skis this year and ultimately they get a 9 seed. They were expected to be an NCAA tournament team, but look at how they finished the year. So normally 4-6 straight up. Then you look at North Carolina. Since that horrific, ugly, disgusting, whatever you want to look at, Pittsburgh loss at home, they turned it around. They've got the talent. Can they put it together? Obviously, they lost to Virginia Tech, but I think UNC, at the peak of their powers, certainly capable of not only beating Marquette, but maybe giving Baylor, who's a little bit banged up, a run for their money in the second round.
I think that's the biggest question mark, is which team shows up.
Baylor and Norfolk State. So Baylor, 20-point favorite at the open, 21-point favorite, depending on where you look. Right now on the screen, still that 20.5, 138 range. 20 is also out there. So my question here is, I think Baylor is good enough to win and maybe potentially cover this game, right, Amal? But it's also a Baylor team that we know is pretty beat up, right? Has injuries. Jonathan Tchamwa-Tchatchoua. LJ Cryer has been in and out of the lineup and has been unhealthy for them too. And I think big picture, that maybe starts to wear down on you. Maybe not a matchup against Norfolk State, but the number has moved against them a little bit here. South Point opened up 21. I think that's the thing here with Baylor as we're moving forward. Maybe not so much in this matchup. Think they win. Obviously, they're a 20-point favorite, but the shorthanded nature of their roster could potentially come back to bite them.
Yeah, you mentioned Cryer. He's going to be a game-time decision. He's been out since the middle of February.
He's played one game since the middle of February.
Yeah. And they're going to need him in the lineup as they continue to move forward. Now, look, this game, they're going to be able to just roll the ball out there and they're going to be able to win it. Now,
right.
Do they cover the 16.5? Remains to be seen. Not going to get involved in this game. Don't see a particular edge one way or the other. But if we get a focused Baylor team and a defensive Baylor team, I think Norfolk State could be in trouble. If Baylor doesn't bring their A game, we were talking about Iowa State earlier. Baylor had a 29-4 lead against Iowa State at home, and they all of a sudden wind up in a dogfight. So interesting to see how this one plays out.
Oklahoma State on the road, right? They went to overtime with Okie State. Actually almost lost that game. Remember the weird buzzer beater that was not because it was a shot clock violation.
I'm going to tell you one thing, though. Mike Boynton's team played far better than people realized this year.
UCLA and Akron, then. Let's talk about this matchup. I know that Greg Peterson and Matt Humans, when I was listening earlier, thought that the underdog was pretty live here, especially when we're talking about the opener at the South Point. Catching 16, catching 15 at DraftKings. Circa opened it lower at 14, and that's our consensus number now, with some spots flashing 13.5 with a total of 128.5 or 129. Have you seen anything from Akron or anything that you haven't seen from UCLA that would make you think that maybe they're not capable of covering a number like this at all?
Well, I think when you look at Akron, they can defend. This is a team that's very solid, but overall, I think the fact that this is such a big number, UCLA is not necessarily the type of team I want to lay a huge number with, but JVT, I like this game under the total. I think Akron's going to struggle to get to about 60. I don't know if the Bruins are going to get to 70 against this Akron team. I like this game under the total. I think the Bruins win this game fairly comfortably, but 14-15 seems a little high for me. I would have to take the Zips and the points. They're not going to touch it.
This is a matchup between the 351st ranked team, that would be Akron in terms of tempo, and the 258th team in terms of tempo, that would be UCLA. So it does seem like this is going to be quite the slow plotting matchup between these two.
Well, the Bruins are one thing, if you look back on it throughout the course of the season, when they decided at Pauley Pavilion they were going to lock some teams down offensively, whether it be Stanford, some of the other teams that came through, they just absolutely put the clamps on these opponents. So this UCLA team, with the way Mick coaches, and I think the fact that Jaquez will not be bothered by any size in this matchup, they should be able to get where they want offensively.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because at the beginning of the year, UCLA, they were actually playing some pretty fast games.
Yeah.
A 77-possession game against Cal State Bakersfield to open the year, 80-possession game against Long Beach State in regulation, that lost to Gonzaga, and Gonzaga's a fast team, so they're going to force you to run. And then that first matchup with Oregon, that was an 82-possession type contest. But then once you started to get into the girth of conference play, started to really slow things down, and I think you'll start to see that a little bit more here, obviously, against an Akron team that wants to slow it down as well. Texas, Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, after winning the ACC, very good tournament run for Virginia Tech. Now they get to take on the Longhorns, who had some ups and some downs. The last time we saw them was a down, blowing, what was it, 16, 18-point lead to TCU?
20, actually, 18 at the break.
18 at the break, there it is. Texas opens up 1.5, depending on where you shop, sometimes 2 over at Circa. Now sitting at 1 or pick with a total of 125 or 124.5. And I think this is going to be one where everybody's going to remember what they saw last of all. Everybody's going to remember Texas blowing a 20-point lead. Everybody is going to remember Virginia Tech taking out Duke and winning the ACC tournament. And it's not surprising to see that the initial market support here is against Texas. But I will say, I have my reservations about Texas. I think offensively, they're a little bit better than given credit for in Big 12 play, but still not a good shooting team. Only 30.7% from beyond the arc against Big 12 opponents. This is a Virginia Tech team that can shoot the ball extremely well, but they are a jump shooting team. They don't get to the foul line a lot. When they do, they shoot the ball pretty well, but they're not going to force the issue within 4 feet, and that could make a little bit of a difference here for Texas.
I have not been a big fan of this Horns team all year long. You mentioned it, the offense at times, I know probably gets criticized more so than how they play overall, but Marcus Carr, to me, regressed when he came in from Minnesota. Allen also transferred in here, didn't do a tremendous job, has been inconsistent at times. Not a big Devin Askew guy. But to me, when you look at Virginia Tech, forget the ACC tournament run. This is a team that's won 13 out of 15.
Yeah.
They have really played well, and I think that's gone a little bit overlooked in terms of how the Hokies performed. I think this can be a dangerous team. I would lean towards the Hokies here, but I'm not going to play this game. And, those 2 losses that they had during that stretch, one was against North Carolina and the other one at Clemson. Brad Brownell's team can never, ever play well outside of Littlejohn, so no surprise they end up losing that game there. But I think Virginia Tech are no play here.
So this is something I want to keep an eye on. This is just a casual observation that I am really interested in. So Texas was one of the worst teams defensively in terms of fouling the opponents. They were 316th in terms of opponent field free throw rate, right? Really bad. I wonder, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Texas is going to foul a three-point shooter at some point in this game. That's the call.
Way to step out on that big branch
That's
there.
the call. That's the call. Beard's going to be upset. No, but seriously, we talk about I like to look at this in the NBA sometimes, right? And the Rockets tried doing this when they went super small in Harden's last year, which was we're just going to shoot a bleep load of threes, right? And not that Virginia Tech shoots a bleep load of threes, but it gives you an advantage when you're the better three-point shooting team. And when you have one team that shot nearly 40% from three on the season and the other that shot 32% from three on the season, it's a pretty big edge there for Virginia Tech if those shots are falling.
I think the game against Duke kind of really catches and encapsulates what you were talking about here. Against Duke, they go 10 for 22 from the three-point line for 46%. Duke goes 4 for 20. They get 11 offensive rebounds because so many times you have long caroms off of a missed shot. Mm-hmm. And then you look at number of shot attempts for Virginia Tech, 64, Duke 49. Now, Duke had 23 free throw attempts, Virginia Tech just the 12, which you referenced, and probably a couple of those came down the stretch when they were, Duke's fouling, trying to come back in the game. And it was just 2 more turnovers by Duke in that game. And I think you're absolutely right. I like the fact that this team can shoot the three ball. I think they're going to be extremely dangerous. If you're Texas, you've got to live on perimeter defense.
Yep. Also, a matchup of the 341st and 344th ranked teams in terms of tempo. So this, too, is going to be a very, very slow game. Murray State, San Francisco. This is going to be a pretty good one. 7-10 matchup. Murray State being the 7 here. Opens up San Francisco 1.5. It's still sitting at that 1.5 mark with a total of 137.5 or 138, depending on where you look. And I kind of alluded to this, but I'm not the biggest fan of the San Francisco team in terms of their offensive ball. And it simply put, it's this. Again, we go back to the thought process of just get the numbers advantage. Just shoot a lot of threes. And if you can shoot like a decent amount in terms of percentage, you'll have an advantage over any one opponent. This San Francisco team is 38th in terms of three-point shooting rate. They take about 44.4% of their attempts from beyond the arc. But like in conference play, they only shot 33% from three. There were times where the offense was electric, and there's other times where the offense completely fell off. And this is a Murray State defense along their perimeter. Gave up 28% to opponents in conference play. Gave up only 30% on the season. Ended up finishing 24th defensively in that category. I think Murray State is a pretty quick and athletic team that could, I think, stay along the perimeter, run San Francisco off the three-point line, and force them into a pretty clunky offensive performance.
First of all, I'm glad they got a 7 seed. They deserved it. They had a tremendous year. And, you brought up a stat I think is very important, which is their three-point defense for Murray State. And the reason I say that is if you look in the OVC, outside of potentially Belmont or Morehead State, a lot of the teams don't play in the interior. A lot of it is perimeter-oriented. And I think if you're doing that well defensively against a lot of teams in the league that shoot the ball from the perimeter, I think it bodes well for you in a matchup like this against San Francisco.
Yeah, so we'll see. And look, in these neutral court settings, sometimes a team like San Francisco will come out and get red hot, and you just shoot the lights out and they'll move on. But I think, to me, I've seen enough from the San Francisco team down the stretch here, right? It's kind of left some bad tastes in my mouth, right? I mentioned the St. Mary's matchups that Portland lost 69-68, although Portland down the stretch did play a little bit better. But I think St. Mary's, it's kind of been this oddly overvalued team. Like, they've been solidly within the top 5 of Ken Palm's numbers, and it's not something that I've really understood.
A number 2 seed taking on St. Peter's, a 15 seed. Another huge spread in this one. Last I checked, it was 17.5. But a huge number for a Kentucky team that's been a little bit up and down. They should get the job done, though, pretty easily.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, St. Peter's, I think a lot of people, when you thought about the MAC, that's with 2 A's.
Return of the MAC. No? Okay.
Well, that's, I mean, when we sing about that, we're talking about Maction. This is MAC action with the double A's. But St. Peter's coming out of the MAC. Iona was upset by Ryder in that conference tournament. So here come the Peacocks, and they're able to slip their way in. The whole thing about Kentucky is, at their peak, they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in the country. I believe that. With Ty Washington, with Wheeler, with the likely player of the year in Oscar Tshiebwe. They get bounced by Tennessee. A tricky matchup there for them. So, this is another situation. We talked to Hoops Peterson about, Yale going up against Purdue, and that size. I mean, who on St. Peter's is slowing down Oscar Tshiebwe? And with the backcourt there, so you look at St. Peter's, they're getting hot. They've won 7 straight. I mean, this is a team that started, 10-6 in the MAC. The MAC is, a conference that is considered 19th best in the country, but they still found their way to get hot at the right time. I just think if you're running into a full-strength Kentucky, this could be a situation where we might see this number go up. Even though Ken Palm has it at 15, I think this has the potential of a blowout there for the Wildcats. And, for them, I actually like their draw a little bit in the bottom of the East region with Purdue as their 3 seed. We know how pretty much Purdue struggles defensively. I think with that size, Oscar Tshiebwe against those bigs in Purdue, if we ultimately get that matchup, I think Kentucky's got a decent road to get to the East region final.
Purdue-Yale. What were your thoughts on that when you saw that matchup initially?
Yeah, Yale stealing the bid from the Ivy League. They were the 2 seed. They beat Princeton. So Princeton, unfortunately, the regular season champ, is headed to the NIT, and Yale is a team that has certainly had their success in the NCAA tournament before under James Jones. They had that classic against Duke just a handful of years ago. And then you get Purdue. You're going to get a pretty big line in this one, so might be a situation where you're looking at Purdue. The worry I would have about backing Yale in this spot is the size of Purdue down low. We know about the elite athleticism of a guy like Jaden Ivey, but Travion Williams and Zach Edey. Zach Edey today had like 14 rebounds in the loss against Iowa. So I worry about Yale in this regard. Do they just get absolutely bullied down low by this Purdue team? Purdue, for me, is kind of a one team that I don't really trust just because of the defense factor north of 100 in Ken Palm and defensive efficiency, Stormy. And you look at some of their losses down the stretch. But I think this is a really tricky matchup for Yale, who, hell of a win today. But I think heading into this game, I do wonder if the size is going to be a massive issue for Yale.
Get prepared for all the madness with VSiN's Tournament Betting Guide, daily best bet emails, plus full access to VSiN through April 5th for only $19 at VSiN.com/madness.